Did you know that rural communities make up nearly 30% of the EU population and cover almost 80% of its territory? Quite impressive, right? Rural places may have fewer resources than cities, but they hold something equally powerful: strong identities, deep local history, and people who know how to create with what they have. In this short video, I invite you to explore how connection and creation can become powerful forces for strategic cooperation and networking in rural areas. When entrepreneurs, artists, municipalities, and local groups join forces, they turn small ideas into big changes. We will explore what strategic cooperation is and how networking in rural areas actually works. Successful cooperation starts with trust and shared vision, regardless of the field of work. These are the 5 steps on strategic cooperation that will lead us through this video. Ground partnerships in local identity and history, engage local authorities and key stakeholders. Map and measure your creative and cultural ecosystem. Co-create cross-sector solutions. Sustain cooperation through regular check-ins and slow organic growth and parties constantly involved in the process. The first step is ground partnerships in local identity and history. In rural areas, local history is not just memory, it's a resource. Every village, craft, tradition, and even dialects hold potential for new ideas, new projects, and community pride. These roots shape how people work together and what they care about. Local stories often become the foundation for festivals, creative residency, touristic routes, and cultural initiatives. They create natural starting points for cooperation. The second step: engage local authorities and key stakeholders. Local governments are not just administrators, they are partners in creativity. They provide infrastructure, public spaces, and long-term vision.
Of course, there are a lot of tips, a lot of items, and I would try to isolate 3 of them. First one is about the question of, I will say, the history. So this network of entrepreneurs are settled in a territory, in a place, and history counts. The second one is the question of the relevant size of the intervention. Has it to be at the level of a municipality or intercommunality or of a region? And the third one is also a question of governance. It's the question of the infrastructure. You need to have devoted infrastructure in order to organize the innovation towards CCIs in the territory.
Effective cooperation happens when municipalities, citizens, and creative actors co-design solutions together. From cultural centers to co-working spaces, share markets, mobility services, or restored heritage buildings. Step number 3: map and measure your creative and cultural ecosystem. Cultural and creative industries in rural areas include crafts, performing arts, design, heritage, digital creativity, festivals, gastronomy, storytelling, and much more. But how do we measure the creative impact? We could use these indicators: number of creative enterprises and freelancers, cultural participation, employment in creative fields, youth involvement, local products and innovations emerging from traditions. Measuring cultural and creative industries helps communities understand their potential and advocate for support, contribute to economic resilience, social cohesion, and last but not least, rural identity. Cooperation today depends on connectivity. Fast internet in some rural places is indeed a luxury. Bridges we create online on a daily basis are not equally accessible for everyone. So keep that in mind when attracting partners and promoting your work. The fourth step is co-create solutions and innovation across the sectors. Rural innovation thrives when sectors blend culture with agriculture, design with ecology, technology with tradition. A great example is Orange Fiber in Italy. They turn citrus waste from juice production into sustainable textile fibers. What began as a small collaboration between designers, local farmers, and researchers grew into a platform for eco-innovation and creative entrepreneurship. This shows how rural cooperation can lead to international recognition. By linking Orange Fiber's innovation to the cultural heritage of the orange industry in Sicily, the company was able to attract the attention of high-end fashion brands. This model is a very good example that can inspire similar collaborations across rural Europe, but let's not forget, this is not 100% working model that you can just copy-paste. Always keep in mind the context in which you are developing your idea. And the final step, sustain cooperation through regular check-ins and slow organic growth and parties constantly involved in the process. Partnerships are living organisms. They change, grow, and sometimes need recalibration.
In that sense, I would say that we have to be very tender towards ourselves, and what is necessary is to kind of listen to one another, to find main common denominators around which we are gathering, and in that sense also to be attentive to continuously check up if our needs and values have changed regularly, so that somehow we can adjust what we are doing. And then process-wise, I think it's extremely important to have in mind our aims, goals, and ambition, and how do they adjust to what we can do regarding all the capacities that we have at disposal. And in that sense, I think it's very important to go slowly to achieve the goal, rather than being very quick and wanting to do everything at once and then stopping in the middle of the road because we found ourselves left out of any capacities and resources.
She's right. This keeps cooperation healthy, nourishing, and sustainable. And remember, there is no need to rush. Rural processes grow strong when they grow slowly. Rural development is a shared effort. Volunteers keep cultural life alive, and young people bring new skills. Newcomers and migrants enrich the local identity with fresh perspectives. I would like to underline that when we talk about migrants, we could mean workers, refugees, even lifestyle migrants. That would mean relocation in search of places with lower living costs, better climate, and social conditions, usually community-based life. All this is causing rural areas to become increasingly diverse places inhabited by transnational and transcultural populations. Understanding the social context helps create inclusive, resilient collaborations. Networking in rural regions is often underestimated, but it's one of the most powerful tools for growth. When talking about strategic cooperation and networking, the word alliances naturally appears. But what are alliances when we think of the European context? They connect local ideas with wider European strategies, like the EU's Smart Villages concept, to boost digitalization, sustainability, and entrepreneurship in rural areas. In Austria, the Smart Village initiative links municipalities and businesses to co-create digital services for local people. This is just one of the many examples of how alliances show ways local cooperation can grow into powerful networks that shape the future of rural life. Do you know what kind of rural networks exist? They can be Local, for example, cultural centers, cooperatives, youth groups, or regional. That includes creative clusters, development agencies. National, such as sector associations, funding bodies. And European, like the European Common Agriculture Policy Network, which brings together national rural development networks and national common agricultural policy networks to support both agricultural and rural development policy. They help rural actors share experience, gain visibility, and access funding and new markets. How to create more networking opportunities at the local level? How about considering local meetups and fairs, digital platforms, and artist residencies or cross-regional exchanges? A great example is the Ruritash project, which set up rural regeneration hubs across Europe, providing that when people connect, rural regions thrive. Another example of an international cluster is the Arctic Arts Summit Network in Finland, Norway, and Sweden, connecting creative people across the north to keep culture and innovation alive, even in the most remote regions. Now, let's find out how to join a network. Here's some tips. Participating in events, workshops, and festivals. Joining an artistic cooperative or association. Signing up for online communities. Applying for EU-funded programs and finding your partners and networks there. Simply introducing yourself. Rural networks often value direct personal contact. I am sure that at this point you may be asking yourself, does networking actually matter? The simple answer is yes. Because in rural areas, networking not only reduces isolation, builds skills and confidence, strengthens local identity, but it also opens doors to funding and collaborations that helps preserve culture, crafts, indigenous languages, and of course, identity. Bulgaria, for example, has more than 3,300 chitalishta. These are cultural and community centers. Keep in mind that this is a country of just around 6.7 million people. Even in remote villages without a hospital, there is usually a chitaliste. They are true creative hubs preserving traditions and supporting intergenerational dialogue. They show how a strong network can shape national identity. Non-urban areas are truly some of the most fruitful places to make change. Here, creativity grows from community. Here, cooperation shapes the future. And here, protecting indigenous languages and cultural roots and our sense of belonging is not just valuable, it's essential. So remember, connect, create, cooperate. Because rural areas are not remote, they are remarkable.